Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Networking and Relationship Management Workshop, which will be presented today by Matt Casey of the Career Center. So I will pass it over to Matt.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to make sure I can see myself on here. Perfect. And share my screen. There we go. Perfect. Welcome, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces, so this is great. For those of you that I have not met before, my name is Matt Casey. I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Career Services here at Tufts. This role is a year old, so it's nice. It's the first dedicated resource we've had specifically for graduate students here at Tufts, and it's an amazing job, and I love it. So to be able to create events like this and talk about content and best practices is something I certainly enjoy it and hope we will derive some benefit from today. My hope is to provide some ideas about high-level topics, best practices, options, tools, and resources. Like to run through the presentation, share some information and insights, and then ideally open this up for conversation at the end. But if you do have any pressing questions in between, I'm happy to answer them. So without further ado, let's get started. So before we get into networking and relationship management, one thing I always start presentations with is recognizing that we at the Career Center see career services and career planning as a process, and that everybody at any given time falls along a continuum within this process in their career and job search and internships planning. So for those of you who are trying to figure out what you want to do next, we're adept at helping people figure out how to understand themselves. We do a great job of helping people figure out how to target those opportunities and then how to execute on those strategies. But today we're going to focus on networking and relationship management. And although it has its own unique place on this sheet, I will say that networking relationship management is, I think, ubiquitous and spans across all of these pieces. For a bulk of this conversation will be around networking relationship management, around career planning and strategy. But there are other situations where it doesn't necessarily have to involve that space. So here's the agenda for today, where we'll talk about discovery and branding. We'll talk about you, and then we're going to talk about creating those networks, and then we're going to talk about how to figure out how to manage those relationships and opportunities, and also address some tools and resources that can be helpful moving forward. Many of you have probably seen this slide before. I tend to use it often as an example. But for those of you who haven't, I imagine many, if not all of you, recognize this brand. And when I've presented previously, things that come to people's mind are transportation, ease of use, access, technology. I've also heard struggling brand. I've heard Uber Eats and transportation. I've heard more expensive. So a variety of different ways to consider thinking about and describing this particular brand. Conversely, a lot of the things I just mentioned are similar with Lyft. But I've also heard less expensive, more friendly, better brand. I've heard the mustache. So for those of you who have a preference, I imagine some of you will have a preference for Uber, some of you will have a preference for Lyft, and for the remainder of you don't have a preference at all. But that is important to recognize because this is embedded in how we think about networking and relationship management. Is that the same process that you use to discern between two similar brands in the same category is exactly the same process people use, including hiring managers, to discern between two similar candidates for an opportunity. But it's, in this particular case, it's recognizing is that we have specific associations, understandings, and experiences with these brands that drive how we think about it and how we engage them. That same thinking applies to people just as well as it does to brands. So we would like to help you be the interesting, engaged individual in a sea of people. And how do you build those relationships, and how do you become interesting to the people around you? So you can find the people you want to talk to, and then when you are engaging them, is that they want to continue to support and sustain a relationship with you. I just tend to put this slide in because I think it's helpful to realize is that it's not just about being unique and interesting. Having purpose and value to the communities that you're engaged with is important. I think it is helpful to remember that you are not only your degree, you are not only your job title or your job titles, and you're not your personal and professional credentials. Is that, that sets a limitation on the boundaries of how we engage with people and the topics in which we do. From a career standpoint, we are really thinking about is why are you valuable? And why are you interesting? And that is important because conversations can take place on a variety of different levels, and relationships are not exclusively built on business and professional transactions. They're based on, I'll show you next, is a variety of things. So how do we craft this idea of this you before we think about presenting it and engaging with others with it? This is another slide that tends to be embedded in most of the presentations that I give, and it's fundamental and foundational for overall career planning and management, but it's very, very important for networking and relationship management. So when we think about interviewing, for instance, at any given time, the interviewer, within a certain set of boundaries, can ask you any question that they want. And that would be true of just anybody you're talking to. That can be overwhelming. The idea is how do we take all the information about ourselves and contextualize it and compartmentalize it so we can use it later. So this is a personal inventory framework. This framework is designed to capture information about you that you can use throughout your personal and professional lives. So we think it is vital for individuals to understand their interests and passions. So what do they like? What do they love? What can they not live without? And these are not exclusive to work or careers or academics. This is about you. So relationships are built on shared interests and shared passions, for instance. We are interested in skills and competencies. What are you good at? What are you great at? What are you terrible at? What are you excellent at and never want to do again? So this is making sure you're recognizing things that you can do and value that you've created, again, across the board. And this is oftentimes speaking to hard skills. So, analytical skills or the ability to work with technologies or tools, but it's also talking about soft skills. It's talking about relationship management. It's talking about collaboration and connection. This is usually where people stop thinking about when they're doing job and career planning is, what do I like and what can I do with it? But people engage with people, and whole people contain multitudes. So we want people to understand their attributes and descriptions. So these are the brand attributes that people would associate with you, or how you associate with yourself. So how would you describe yourself? How would others describe you? How would you ideally like to be described? So this provides a vocabulary that differentiates you from another. We care about values and motivators. What's important to you? What's important in an organization? What's important in a person? What is important in your life? Do you value family or connection or engagement? Those are sort of overarching drivers, especially when thinking about, who you engage with and who you might want to work for. And then styles and preferences. So how do you like to work? How do you like to work with others? How would others like to work with you? How do you like to be managed? How do you like to lead? What's the worst boss you've ever had? This is a way to communicate with others about the types of work that you like to do and the things that you like to do and the settings you like to do it and the people you like to do it with. And lastly, goals and expectations is, in career terms, is why are you doing what you're doing? Do you want to retire at 30? Do you want to buy a house? Do you want to achieve enlightenment? Do you want to have a family? So recognizing is that, what are the intentions behind the ideas that you have? So why go through this again is that I'll speak to interviewing just for a second and say every interview question you will get, except for industry specific technical ones, will come out of these 6 boxes. But the reality is that this is a way to structure, simplify information about you. So when you are actively engaging with somebody, there's a reference point to make connection. I'll just mention that on the Career Services website, we have tools and resources to source some of this information. So if you're trying to aggregate a vocabulary or discern elements or understand pieces about you, we have static tools, we have virtual tools and assessments that can help with these pieces. And that's what we're here for with Career Services, is to help collect and allocate this kind of information. But I think recognizing that you have these tools at your disposal is helpful. I'll reiterate this again, is that, networking and relationship management can be with anyone. For the purposes of career planning, this is where intention is important, is not only who do you want to build relationships with, how valuable can those relationships be to you? And then in reciprocity, how valuable can your relationship be to the person or the people that you're connecting with? And then I will echo it one more time, saying that being interesting is not being dynamic or excited or extroverted. It's about recognizing the variety of things that are relevant to us and understanding that how much information is available to us to make individual connections with others. There's a variety of tools at the end of this presentation, but I think this is a helpful format for thinking about a starting construct for a building, communicating your brand to somebody else. For those of you who may not have done this before, maybe not, had developed an elevator pitch or had to speak about yourself in front of class, or to write a bio, or anything to showcase who you are. What this is for the viewer who have used them is like a Mad Lib. It's a fill in the blank with certain keywords and those keywords are often derived from that personal inventory form. So this is a framework to pull out specific pieces of individual information, but it's not just specific to one thing. So you can craft sort of a message and this is something you could put in a LinkedIn profile, you could speak to it, but this is a way to simplify a message about who you are to potentially catalyze an engagement, an introduction, or a conversation. So it's not just speaking to your skills. It's not just speaking to your expertise. It's speaking to your interests. It's speaking to your styles. It's speaking to your preferences. And what this information does is give, for those of you who you end up communicating with, in a networking or relationship management setting, is that it gives the other person something to work with. It gives them information to access. It gives them something to potentially relate to. Is that more information can be better. And it works the same in reverse. I imagine people who are reaching out to you, understanding more about that person and what they're about and what they're looking for allows you to think about how you can help support them. So again, this conversation, this overview right now is specifically designed to remember the fact that none of this works without your clarity of understanding about yourself. And the fact that I assure that every one of you is incredibly valuable. I assure you, I already know that all of you are incredibly interesting, and that for those of you where this is incredibly comfortable, this can be just maybe a new way of thinking. For those of you where networking may feel new, this is a starting point, and career services can most definitely help you navigate this particular experience. So how do we think about creating our network? And what is that? In relation to career management, I could not agree with this statement more. Everyone should build their network before they need it. I think being proactive in your relationships, in your engagement, and we'll speak to a number of reasons why, is that you're already cultivating your relationships. You already have connections, and maybe ones you have, and maybe ones you haven't even considered that you currently have or have easy access to. But it's invaluable to recognize that if it's not something we've been thinking about before, it's something we think about right now. So why network? Because it's absolutely vital to work, is that because organizations do not just hire for skills, they hire for people. And in order for them to understand people, they typically have to meet them or advocate for them. So I think for networking standpoint for this conversation today, networking relationship management allows you to explore careers firsthand. So to be able to talk with practitioners, talk with people that have experience or people that have access or people that have preferences about these things. It is an amazing way to source advice about jobs. I do agree that referral sources are helpful for job search, but networking, especially initially, is not about asking for a job. Relationships are built on time. They're built on a common set of goals and interests and preferences, and they're built on value. So the idea of trying to ask for something without starting a relationship, especially when you're thinking about jobs, can be certainly off-putting to potential people that could be advocates for you. You can meet people in your field of interest. This is critical, is how important relationships are, is that technology is an amazing way to source career opportunities. People are getting jobs from it every day. You are 10 times more likely to secure a job or an internship opportunity through a relationship. So the idea is that technology is fantastic, but it's static, and it is hard to recognize the nuances or the key areas of differentiation from individual to individual. The power of somebody handing a resume to a recruiter versus receiving it through an applicant tracking system is very, very powerful. Even if you submit an application through a company's job portal, having someone still send your resume with a note about you is incredibly valuable. It's also, networking can also be in an employee's self-interest. Many organizations pay referral bonuses to individuals that refer candidates for jobs. And for a lot of industries, these can be 4 and 5 figure pieces for 90-day. You get past 90 days in your job, you get paid a referral bonus for referring that person. Why? Because it saves the hiring managers and employers tons and tons of time and money trying to find the right candidates. So, and have, if they trust you to work for their organization, they're trusting you that that you're going to have a level of discernment that you would refer somebody that you are at least interested or trust enough to share their potential with. And just recognizing the fact that, we're still talking about careers a lot, but networking is everywhere. It's to find collaborators. It's to find business partners. You want to be an entrepreneur, you want to scale your business, networking matters. It's why Facebook exists. It's why, Instagram exists. It's why LinkedIn exists, is that, people search for common connection, and that, it's hard to navigate a world all by ourselves. This slide is typically used as a demonstration of 17 different ways that you can customize your job search. It is not exhaustive. There are likely other ways to do it. So if you are looking for a job opportunity or an internship opportunity, you can use job boards, like LinkedIn, like Career Builder or Monster, or targeted job boards, like ones that are focused specific in your industry. You can use company websites. You can use LinkedIn and social media and associations and career centers. Of the 17 job search strategy options, on this particular sheet, 14 of them have a connection to networking and relationship management. So it's recognizing how vital and how embedded relationships are as part of this process, because it doesn't, sometimes people can do direct referrals. Sometimes the networking is just learning more about what somebody's doing, or advocating for somebody else, or getting some levels of expertise. So when you're thinking about the process, and this is for everybody, is that everybody has, depending on what you're looking for, will have their own specific customized job search strategy. It is unlikely to happen exclusively with technology. So we can certainly speak to all of these, but you can see the huge variety. Speaking to recruiters and hiring managers, people that can advocate for you. One of the things I think is critical, and I think it's up in the upper right-hand corner, is communities. This is something I think gets a little overlooked, is recognizing we are all already embedded in communities. We have families, we have colleagues, we have classmates, we have group members. If you're part of a club, if you're part of an association, you have teammates. These people that you've already engaged with are relationships, and they are potential networking contacts. So just recognizing that we are talking about cultivating and developing networks and the utility of those things, but recognizing that they already exist in your lives. Now, are you able to derive maximum benefit from your existing network? You might. If we're having this conversation, you're in this, in this session today, there's probably possibilities of what else could I do to make it worthwhile to give me the best possible options in my career. This is a map of my personal LinkedIn contacts about 8 years ago. Unfortunately, this technology no longer exists. Otherwise, I would use it all the time. But what this is is this is a representation of about 1,000 contacts. And each color cluster is a group or a community of people that I personally work. Most of them are focused either on school or on professional work. So this represents 1,000 connections in LinkedIn. I imagine most, if not all of you, have a LinkedIn profile. This represents 1,000 connections. So these are first degree connections. These are people I have a direct link with on LinkedIn. If I want to speak to a second degree connection, so I want to build a relationship or network with somebody that I have to network through somebody that I know, my second degree connection. That was giving me access to about 500,000 people. LinkedIn allows you to have access to third degree connections. So you have a connection to somebody who has a connection to someone who has a connection to the person you're really wanting to talk to. That represents about 11 million people. The scale and access that we have as individuals within our own markets or industries, and specifically with technology, is remarkable. Most of LinkedIn is a free service. So you have access to a wide swath of people in different backgrounds, and you may not, who you may not have considered historically. There are 700 million people on LinkedIn right now, globally. There are more than 20 million jobs and internships. So this is just a reminder, is that your initial networks have access to their networks and their networks and their networks. And that now it's much easier to find who those people are and then directly or indirectly connect to them to build your career. This slide is something that I love. It's like networking myths. This one is probably the most common question that's asked, or myth, that you must be an extrovert to network successfully. That is wholly untrue. Not everybody wants to walk into a large room with a stack of business cards and talk to strangers. Some people love it. And let's, we'll talk in an existing COVID world where things are a little bit different, obviously. But what we want people to understand is that whatever style that you have, that you prefer to connect and engage with people, is the right way to do it for you, and it will be successful. There are plenty of people that have developed amazing careers and relationships without having to have big audiences. One of my close friends is a serial entrepreneur who happens to have happens to be a little bit more introverted, in so much that that big crowds exhaust him. He doesn't want to be in a big space. So what he ends up doing is he will go to big events, but he'll find out who the key people he wants to talk to, the key stakeholders, and he'll wait for them to be free. He'll do his research before he meets them, and then he'll talk to these people about what is unique about them and what value that he might be able to create. And as far as I know, in the last 20 years, every job opportunity or career or business possibility that he's been a part of has been with a conversation and a handshake, not a resume. It's not saying that resumes and cover letters and documents aren't vital. Is that relationships do directly breed opportunities. So whatever your style is the right one. I think I mentioned before, you already have connections. We will show you a little bit later about where you can access more of them and using your existing communities, particularly Tufts, to sort of build those networks. No one want to meet me. I mentioned before, everybody is interesting. Everybody has an interest. Everybody has something that they prefer or don't prefer. And there are people that want to talk about those preferences and those interests and those styles. So we can help you think about the things that you do want to talk about and who you might want to talk to them about is a great starting point for a catalyst for conversation, because you really never know who knows somebody else. Many of you may know people who have been referred to for jobs from their families or their friends or their coaches or their teachers or their siblings. So it's a pretty common way to source options. And you should only talk to people at senior levels. This I could not disagree with more, is that finding people that you're interested or talking to, I think is critical. And recognizing what your intention is for the relationships that you want to build. This doesn't mean you have to wake up and think very strategically about everybody you're going to meet and what you want to get out of it, or if you want to get anything out of it at all. It's to recognize is that the levels of connections provide opportunities in all areas. You can get, like I mentioned, it could be families and friends. You can talking to existing colleagues, talking to engaging with peers. So just knowing that setting an artificial expectation that people that with decision-making authority are the ones you need to be connecting with is going to significantly limit the options you have when building a professional career. So this is a truncated list, but how can you build your network? And people think about this all the time. There are a variety of different ways to do this. These are just a couple that I think can be helpful. One that I am the biggest advocate for is an agendaless meeting. When I think about agendaless meeting, it's wanting to have a conversation with somebody without deriving anything out of it. For instance, I want to have this conversation with this person because I want them to submit my resume for a job. Agendaless meetings, particularly initial ones, which they mostly are, they're at the beginning, are ones about trying to understand the person you're engaging with. And that for a lot of agendaless meetings, it's about them. It's about asking, what I think domestically this is true. I think this is especially true in the Northeast of the US, is how often people are defined by their jobs or feel like they're defined by their jobs and like talking about their work. People tend to like talking about what they're good at and what they're recognized for. Networking, very solid, helpful networking, is asking people about what they do and how they do it and how they got to where they went is a great way to start a connection and build trust. Another thing with in agendaless meeting, recognizing that you don't have to ask for something. In fact, I'm a big supporter is if you're setting up conversations with somebody, is thinking about what value that you can create for them. That could be anything. It could be just asking outright. It could be, and not knowing what the answer could be. It could be offering your time. It could be offering your network and connections. It could be offering your resources. It could be offering, tools or contacts. So this is sort of being thoughtful that you can have a conversation with somebody that has a shared interest and be able to consider providing value for them. Because if you're providing value for them, that is, they'll be able to, evaluate that. It's looking for, they're not looking to take something. They're looking, you're looking to give something. More common or term people hear is the informational interview. This, typically more specific around, I want to learn specifically about this job. And they typically are about asking for more contacts or a referral to an opportunity. So this might be semantic. It doesn't necessarily have to be informational, but a lot of times informational interviews are planned. They're for specific people, for specific reasons, for a specific topic. I don't see a whole lot of separation between them. I just see informational interviews as transactional. I see generalist meetings as conversational. Event participation, you're probably doing it already. Anything that's on campus, anytime you're going to a workshop, anytime you're going to, presentations on campus, anytime you're going to a workshop, anytime you're going to a speaker, the events usually have a shared community of people that are interested in whatever's happening. So that becomes a captive audience for conversation. Seeking out leadership roles, and this speaks a lot to campus, is that building, it's one thing is to be able to participate and engage. Being a campus leader does open a lot of avenues for people to support and promote their brand. And I say leaders, and it doesn't have to be in title, it's through an execution. I think you can build relationships indirectly by showcasing competence and value and empathy. So there's a way to be sort of intentional about these pieces. There are also ways to put yourself in a community of people and to do things within those spaces. I think that could be very, very helpful. And lastly, I think this is pretty common, is social networks. And I mentioned LinkedIn with its 700 million people, but think about Instagram, think about Facebook, and the fact that Facebook has 4 billion people on it. We're huge communities where there are shared interests, or Pinterest, or I'm sure we could run the gamut of social networks and why, but the very nature of having a social network is that it's social, is that it's an engagement, and recognizing is being able to reach out to people in those spaces and be able to showcase your brand. But those are where you can end up finding a lot of connections. And connections are everything. This doesn't mean you have to go out and seek everybody all the time. It doesn't mean you have to just indiscriminately search for LinkedIn connections or reach out to folks. I think it's recognizing if you're doing it now, continue to do it. If you haven't been doing it or want to think about doing it, this is a good start. And start small. Is that, for LinkedIn is a good example, is, how can you add the people that are already connected with you? Do you have all your classmates in your profile? Do you have your professors? Do you have your family in those places? Because as we've demonstrated before, just the sheer number of people that you have access to is going to give you access to an exponential number of more people on top of that. So make them and start slow and then scale. And this doesn't mean, particularly with LinkedIn, is you don't have to accept every connection request you receive, and you can decide how you want to curate and cultivate your network. I tend to accept all LinkedIn invitations. I very much appreciate people that send me personal messages with them, why they're reaching out to me, so I can keep track of why I have that relationship. LinkedIn, for instance, though, as a lot of businesses are trying to acting as individuals and trying to source business, and I've found that I'm not looking for somebody to help with my business, so I'm not accepting that, because that person now has access to all my connections. So it's there's no real intrinsic value for me to have that relationship. So when Tufts is an amazing start to the relationships that you want to build. Higher ed is actually designed as, they're all little mini cities. So, and have relationships and tentacles all over the world. So one way to really start sourcing, this is LinkedIn, but one is that, building relationships and reaching out to alumni. Why is that a great way to start reaching out and building connection? Is that you have a shared experience within an institution. And that LinkedIn has an alumni function where you can look up the school and the alumni, and you can search and sort by topic and area and location and company. So you're able to sort of source and find the types of people that you would want to reach out to that may be helpful in your career. I imagine many of you are familiar with this, and many of you have worked with it, but I imagine not all of you. So a very good tool. But there are others. So Tufts has multiple networks. The most recent is the Herd. The Herd is a student and alumni engagement platform. Actually, it allows you, so it does two things. One, it's for connections, and it also is a mentoring platform, which is an incredible value. So the idea is alumni are becoming part of this platform and being accessible to existing students to have conversations about either specific topics or in general. So there's a community of alumni who are actively selecting to be on a platform to be available specifically for existing Tufts students. An excellent way to start this process. And what's really interesting right now is we have 3 times more alumni in this program than we do students. So just the very nature, and that will change, because this was launched in the last 6 to 8 months. Setting up a profile, thinking about the communities, and you can sort by communities and topics and areas, so you can find people that have something that is relevant and relatable to you. Next thing is, I mentioned LinkedIn and LinkedIn alumni function, but also LinkedIn has has groups. LinkedIn and Tufts has a Tufts University Career Network, where I think it's more than 16,000 Tufts alumni have asked to be part of this group, and it's actually managed by Alumni Career Services in our department. So my colleague is actually the one that accepts the request. It's an incredibly active community of people talking about ideas and options, jobs, possibilities, not only asking for things, but promoting things. I'm looking for these jobs, I'm looking for these types of people. So that can be a helpful resource. The other thing is Tufts has an alumni directory. So there are more than 100,000 Tufts alums that are in this database. There's more than 70,000, I think, in LinkedIn. So another place to find, and this one is very, very detailed, very, very sortable. This doesn't mean that alumni are the only place to connect. It's just an easy starting process to do that. And because there are so many of them, and because they're all over the place, and because they have relationships in other places, it can create possibilities without having to look for other, to find connection in new communities versus working and supporting ones that you're already engaged with. This one I'll just mention is that networking with professional associations. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So these are topic or interests or specialization specific organizations that are designed and aligned around a specific topic or topics. It is a like-minded community of people within the same space talking about a lot of these things. But what things about a lot of associations, not just academic, are that they have, there's membership pieces, there are workshops and lectures, there are connections and events, a lot of these have very robust community sections and mentorship sections. So if you are interested in, electrical engineering, the IEEE is probably a nice place to start. It's incredibly big and incredibly robust. And I believe it does have a career area. So just recognizing is that just by it could be the very nature of what you're interested in or what you're studying and built expertise in, likely has a place where other people are communing to talk about it. This presentation and all the things that are considered will be available. So we'll make sure that if you've all registered for the event, that we'll send this out to you, because all of the things that you've seen are all hyperlinked. So you can go clean, you don't have to go find them. You can just access them through the document. So thinking about how to manage relationships and opportunities, and bringing to bear a little bit about how things have changed in the last 8 months and why that matters. I think this is just an affirmation of what I mentioned before, is, the currency of real networking is not greed, but generosity. It's the likelihood of getting something by giving something is helpful. And then, but this always goes back to the individual recognizing who they are and why they're interesting and why they're valuable. But if there's struggle in recognizing how to translate that to an audience, like, Matt, I agree with you, potentially, but how do I know that this person would want to talk about this or would want my time? Well, if at the very minimum we can have a dialogue about it, and talk about the possibilities, because again, networking and relationship management is not a one-size-fit-all possibility. Our job in career services is, one is, what are best practices? Two, what are the resources? But also, how can we practice this? And how can we prepare for these things? How, we practice the skill of helping people practice this process and practice to answer these questions. It's so, it's so interesting is that, how, and I'll show it in a minute, how often interview preparation is just the same exercise as networking and relationship management preparation, because a lot of the conversation is the same. It might be a little less specific, but it's the same. So for managing your thing, I mentioned earlier before, networking to your style. Relationships are cultivated and managed. This is vital. You must decide, it may not be immediate, at the level at which you want to manage and you want to develop the relationships you have, how much energy you want to give them, relevant to how useful or interesting they are to you. Not every connection carries the same weight and engagement. Not every connection is going to have utility, or maybe not perceived utility now, but this is why understanding what you're interested in and what you want to do is helpful. Is that the relationships you may build now are with the people that could be hiring you 5 years from now. But the reality is, if you make a connection now and have a conversation and see this person as somebody that might be helpful to you later, waiting 5 years to re-engage with them can work. I happen to be an advocate for, deciding, and we can help with this too, is, preferential relationships and how to continue your relationship with them. I worked with a student years ago at another university and helped them with some career planning. And what was really fascinating is that this person was able to secure a job. And every 6 months, this person sent me a personal email with an update about how they are doing, unsolicited, and wasn't trying to ask for anything. It was just what I thought was a personalized, thoughtful update about how life was going. Professional, mature, the whole works. But what's so interesting about that is that that consistency always had this person at the top of my head for a variety of things, for contacts, for opportunities. If there was a business possibility, if there was somebody, if there was a job that I had heard about, this is somebody I would send it to, just by the very nature of one, being consistent, and two, being personal in that experience. So that, you know, that's one way to think about this thing. But just recognizing, and I go down to the fourth bullet, is that, you know, networking and relationship management that's purely transactional can be incredibly limiting. You know, at Tufts it's different. You have a common thread, especially those you may not have a common thread with. It could be very difficult. Like I said, not all relationships carry the same importance. So you craft it, you think about it, but the relationships you build are not independent of all the things that make you you. So event networking is probably often a big deal. You know, usually we career fairs, especially on campus. Now that we're migrating to a virtual model, which is actually working very, very well. But I will say, if you're doing event preparation for networking and relationship management, I think networking and don't interview is that you're not, especially in the events, they're, especially with career fairs, they're conversations. These are conversations with individuals that, especially with organizations that are coming to career fairs, they have a need that needs to be filled, and they're looking for candidates to do it. Candidates have a skill and are looking for a job to compensate them for that aptitude. So recognizing it's not unilateral anymore. It's two audiences trying to make a connection and see what the possibilities are. Preparation is paramount. Is that, especially with a career fair or any event in general, if you can have access to what the organization is, what it does, who are the participants, what are they like, doing LinkedIn due diligence, especially with companies, what's their products, what are their services, how long have they been around, is there any news? Looking like you care about the things that they're doing is a strong connection point. So doing your research is important. And certainly with these events is be selective. It's with a traditional career fair, it was, it could be networking by serendipity, is that you happen to stop by a table to talk to somebody. And that, that creates opportunities all the time. In a virtual setting, it's much more intentional. It's something you would set up. You can set up individual conversations with a person, and you can set up group conversations as well. So same preparation to start the process, but the virtual engagement actually can provide a little bit more specific intimacy in a conversation, an access point for somebody to learn more about you individually without the associated distractions in an open air setting. So, and I think they've been successful so far and able to stand out. I'll just mention for those of you, where networking and relationship management is a big deal, is that in our career fairs, we have 4 of them this semester. So there's detailed information all over the Career Services website to have access to these pieces. We will have more in the spring, but what's great is not only does we sharing that these things exist. The Career Services team has done an extraordinary job. I can't take any credit because this wasn't mine, but to navigate this, to build these things, but also to educate. There are very explicit YouTube videos of how to successfully navigate this stuff and how to manage and sign up for these processes or these opportunities. There are links, there are possibilities, there's what you can, there's scheduling sheets. So there are lots of resources at your disposal to learn how to navigate these pieces. This is just vital because career fairs are a big part of what career services has historically offered as one of the benefits, is that we have an incredible employer relations team. We have incredible relationships with employers all over the world. In this particular case, we get to bring them to a place. Now we're not limited by geography anymore, which is even more interesting. So we can extend our reach to a variety of options. And this is just making sure is that our employer relations and career services team in general, we are talking with employers and nonprofits and for-profits and universities all the time. And we're actively cultivating our relationships so we can help connect you. Is that there's, for a lot of us, there's nothing more enjoyable than being a bridge between two people that find value in that experience. So a lot of us just love it. So don't, not being afraid to ask for those things. And, at a very minimum after this conversation, I hope that you all will link into me. And hopefully, because we're on this presentation, I'm happy to refer any of you at any time to anyone, certainly after a conversation, so be able to leverage your existing assets that you have here. I'm only going to mention this quickly. I have this slide a little bit later, is that because of the virtual setting, networking is so different. There's no timetable to when I don't know what normalcy will look like. I don't know what that'll be. I don't know if it'll be a masked world where we'll be struggling with nonverbal communication, not be able to see faces. So recognizing the whole world is adapting to a new space. But thinking about this forum and this setting in the virtual space, recognizing is that if your computer or your tablet or your phone is your bridge between you and another person, making sure that the setup that you have is as optimal as possible. And there's a ton of resources out, but it sounds very basic, but lighting matters. The sound matters. Like the aesthetic behind you matters. I'm working in a new office, so the aesthetic that you see behind me isn't actually super exciting. I have to, so maybe a virtual background at some point. Great frame. So even though, in an interview or even an individual connection, when you're seeing another human being, 60% of the conversation you have with anybody else is nonverbal, which means nobody's speaking. It means it's all gesticulation and posture and micro expressions and etc. And those nuances are a little bit harder in a virtual world, but you can also have a lot more control over these pieces. So making sure that whatever you're doing, you have it set the way you want it to, because you, just like you did in person, you want to be able to put your best foot forward, and this is the way to do it. Again, I added this a little bit later too, because I think it can be helpful. All Tufts students have access to a resource called Big Interview. We've actually had it for several years. Big Interview is a interview preparation platform that allows you to do interview preparation with coaching online. It is a vast portfolio of general and industry and topic specific questions. It allows you to, if you choose to, record your visual and your audio to specific questions. It also has embedded machine learning and AI that will give you feedback, I think, on 10 to 12 different sets of criteria. So recognizing that it's a tool that was typically used or thought of to be used for interviewing. But what it can be used for is a way to practice answering questions about you in a virtual setting, which is exactly what networking and relationship management for a lot of us is. And the registration details are all, part of this. I know we're bleeding over time, so I'll be quick and then open up to questions for those who like to stay on. You can manage your relationships. you can, one of the big terms in relationship management is customer relationship management, CRM systems. There are a variety of them. Salesforce is a big one, for those of you who are familiar with that. But the links that you see up here are examples of CRM system or places you can keep contact data or information. So the idea is that you could make a contact with somebody on LinkedIn. You used to be able to add notes for each profile, so you could keep track of how you know that person. So it's an embedded free CRM system. Now it doesn't exist. So now there are third-party systems that allow you to do that. So recruiters and hiring managers use this every day. So when they have a conversation with a potential candidate, they're tracking these notes. So they may not have a job for you today, but when they're looking for another search for a similar job, you're in their database and know exactly what you talked about, when you talked about it, and what you're looking for. This is a tool that gives that sort of resource access to individuals. One that's very helpful for those of you that use Gmail is Streak. So Streak is free and it actually allows you to manage the connections within that system. This is just a representative example of a variety of technologies that to consider. I'm not going to certainly go through all of them, but there are tools to help you navigate this, not just your mind and a piece of paper. So for the remainder of this, tools and resources, we have things in here about outreach emails and conversations. Everything on the subsequent pages are hyperlinked, so you can look through them in more detail. This is just a representative example of a possible, initial outreach email to an individual. But there's certainly a variety of other ones. Again, sample networking email. I was mentioning setting up a LinkedIn contact. If you're going to reach out, this is just an idea of if you find a contact you want to reach out to, sending a message with that contact can be helpful. This is how it looks like if you're actually doing it. And this is just sort of a snapshot of where your connections might be embedded in LinkedIn. We have a networking page in the career services site that's always being updated. We have this graduate career guide that has information about networking that can be helpful to you. We want to be able to be a resource for you if you want to engage with us directly, or a resource for us or a resource for yourself if you want to navigate on your own terms. Hopefully this conversation today was a useful overview with some relatable pieces for how to sort of build your personal network and how to think about you and why that's so valuable, and some of the tools that you can act to make that a little bit easier, and to build the communities that you want to connect to and leverage the ones that you have. So we do have a presence at the Career Center. There's 1 to 2 people there every day. We're not having any appointments. All career services events and coaching is virtual this semester. And we'll see if that changes in the spring. But it seems to be working out very well. So I am grateful for the time and your attention. And I would be happy to field any questions you may have. But thanks for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I have a question. How would you go about making these connections now when things are virtual? Like, you can't really just walk up to someone and strike up a conversation. How, managing situations like this where there isn't breakout rooms to connect with other people?
Yeah. There's a big, I think one thing is personal interest forums are going to be helpful. So places where common community, graduate student council and the events that they're putting on, engaging and being part of student organizations is probably interesting anyways, probably even more important now as a way to sort of build community. Being very intentional about who you want to reach out to, but not being so prescriptive about it that it limits who you want to engage with. This is what is happening now, is that the marketplace is forcing people to be more attentive to who they are and what they want. Because So, because that has to be communicated effectively. And what you want doesn't have to be, I want that job. What I want is, I'd like information, or I'd like to help, or I want to share my opinion. So, I'd be going back and thinking about, for professional reasons, the things that you're interested in, the roles that you're looking for, the companies that you're interested in, and finding individuals to build those outreach to is helpful. It doesn't mean, big networking breakout rooms are happening, but the world's trying to figure it out. So it's forcing intention, and it's forcing people to be adaptive and actually cast, a lot of times cast a wider net. And for a lot of us, it's out of our comfort zone. It's going out for a cup of coffee has been a universal way to build relationships, as a social piece in the US, and that is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Going out for dinner is gone. Like going to a big workshop is gone. So even thinking about, what workshops would you want to go? How are they being facilitated? What do their breakout rooms look like? What do you want to learn in that experience? Who do you want to help? I'd be thinking about those pieces. And then I'd be leveraging your close relationships. Like I would be making sure that, and this is something I found as a private coach initially, and then it's evolved from that, is how often the people that care the most about us and are the biggest advocates for our joy and contentment are the ones that know the least about us. So, for those of you, how many of your friends and family could explain what you do and what you're looking for, or close colleagues? Maybe some of you, it's incredibly clear. For a lot of us, it hasn't been. But those are folks that are become advocates. So whatever your existing network is right now, I would be making sure that those people know exactly who you are and what you're looking for. I would be looking more formally at communities of common interest, communities of people that share your common interests, and being less passive about how that you might leverage that. Is that, should I join that association? Maybe. Should I be part of that group? Maybe. Like, as opposed to like, maybe this will happen later. But it's nothing changed about getting jobs and the value of networking. Just how the informality of it has been hit pretty hard. So we're having people, how do you maximize the formality of it? Those are a couple of ways I think could be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I think I have a question. Would you ask for an agendaless meeting via cold call email? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea is, what your agendaless is. You don't have an agenda for the meeting to get something out of the meeting other than knowledge or that connection. So yeah, I would tell the audience, I think there's some examples, why you are interested in them specifically. This is where research matters. And you can be as Spartan or as detailed as you like, and be specific about what you would like to get out of that conversation. In the idea is that the conversation, I said, I would love to learn more about how you navigated your career, or how did, you pivoted in this place to do this, and I'm sharing a similar experience. Then create the conditions to help them become more likely to accept that opportunity. I would give them days of availability, times of availability, your Zoom information, your phone number. The fact that you say, if I don't hear from you in a few days, I'll follow up. But what you're doing is and for a lot of, even agendaless meetings, is that you can say you can have an overarching, say, these are the 2 questions I would love to ask you. So then you can have structure around it. And it doesn't mean your conversation is going to be limited to that. It's just that you're creating the boundaries for that. That's appreciating their time and energy to accept that opportunity. So, if somebody's, if I get outreach for those things, like, and it doesn't, flattery, I suppose, can be helpful. I think facts are helpful. Like, if somebody's interested that I have 10 years of career strategy experience and they want to understand how I navigated out of a business role, it was an interesting, unusual experience, and I'm grateful for it. But if you recognize that and you give me a lot of time and flexibility, and for me, I don't necessarily need the specific questions. I can run off the topic because that makes me comfortable and I'm okay with that. But I would oftentimes, if you don't know that person or know anything about that person, is there inside of detail and make it incredibly easy for them to engage, and recognize the fact that patience is going to matter. And just because you don't hear back does not mean it's personal. Is that some people just don't go back and think of how many companies you've applied to for jobs that don't tell you that we're not considering your candidate, which 25 years ago, you got a letter. They're like, we appreciate you coming in, or appreciate your consideration. We're moving forward with other candidates. This is a busy time. People are overwhelmed. But if there are specific people that you are really interested in, yeah, I think you could be, the squeaky wheel can get the grease. By that, I mean, being diligent and consistent with outreach to get the desired outcome, recognizing is, at some point you might not get the answer. And that if this is the kind of person that has this kind of experience, who are the other people who have that experience that you want to discern from? So another one, in academia, we're encouraged to publish popular articles. I find it difficult to publish in popular newspapers without connections. I do not have some of these connections in India, but not in the US. How do I go about it? If you're trying to publish, there's actually probably a fair number of forums. Freelance, if it's publishing articles, they're freelance content developers are incredibly popular. So, YouTube hires them, BuzzFeed hires them, HuffPost hires them. So there's a lot of places that are looking for that type of specific content. So I'd be thinking about
freelance, you said?
Social media outlets that could be helpful to do that.
What was the exact thing that you mentioned? Freelance?
Yeah, sure. So freelancer are probably freelance content creators, freelance reporters, freelance. It's probably a pretty good start. If you go to Yahoo News, you're going to see bylines by people that aren't employed by Yahoo. They are paid. In fact, one thing that Yahoo does is that they'll say, this is what we want an article on, and they'll have 25 people write that article, and they'll select the one that they want, and they'll pay that person. So there's a whole different ways to do it. The alternative is publish your own content.
In what form? As a blog or?
Your own blog, website, LinkedIn page, YouTube, Twitter. Twitter's becoming interesting because people are breaking out articles and turning them into threads. Mm-hmm. So it's a much different way to absorb information, but you have access to a larger audience. And you have access to a community of followers you might not get when you're publishing in articles. So recognizing is that who are the consumers of the content you're generating is the most important thing. And once you figure out what the users are, you say, how do they absorb it?
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Perfect. Well, my role, I'm here at your discretion and your need. So, we talk about, we're available to help anywhere on the career planning process. We do executive coaching. You know, how do you figure out how to, you know, how do you stay on what you want? How do you get what you want? How do you get promoted? How do you deal with a hostile boss? How do you deal with a bad PI? How do you, et cetera? So, you know, we're trained coaches. So I think that's one of the things where we can be very helpful with. So you're paying for it. We love doing it. So please use us as a resource. Excellent. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks so much.